Welcome back to the Wide Right Podcast. I'm Manny Navarro, college football writer for The Athletic. Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Podcast is with us again. It is Tuesday, October 24. Your Miami Hurricanes are coming off an impressive win over Clemson, probably the most impressive win of the Mario Cristobal era, their first ACC home win under Cristobal. I wrote a column for The Athletic about how Miami basically did it the Mario Cristobal way. We're going to talk about what that means in a few moments. This week, the Hurricanes, they host Virginia, who is coming off a road upset, top 10 road upset at North Carolina, a team that obviously beat Miami 2 weeks ago. We'll talk a little bit about Tony Muskett and the Cavaliers, who are now 2-5. We have some recruiting news to discuss, some injury news, some mailbag questions. But Carlos, let's start with this upset of Clemson because Miami was the home underdog. I feel as though it might be the turning point for this program. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let's discuss this new intro because nobody noticed it, but it didn't slip under my radar. You went from Miami Hurricanes beat writer for The Athletic to college football writer for The Athletic. So that means your role is expanding with The Athletic. Is that correct?
Well, I'm gonna be at the University of Florida Georgia game this Saturday, not at the Miami Hurricanes game. So I think I'm gonna be in different places at different times. I'm obviously still gonna have a focus on the Hurricanes, but this week I will be at Florida Georgia because it is a bigger game than Miami Virginia. The Gators obviously it'd be a huge upset if they're able to pull it off against Georgia, who's the two-time defending champions, but they are 5-2. They are playing well and coming off a bye week, and so I was requested to go up and cover that game along with 3 other reporters. So I will be there. I will have an eye on the Hurricanes, and I will be rewatching the game after it's over because it is at the same kickoff time. I think they're both 3:30 p.m. kickoffs on Saturday. So, but I am, I'm calling myself college football writer because I feel like, I'm going to be all over the place.
So there we go. So there's that. Two things come to mind. Number one, all of you that have not subscribed to The Athletic yet, you need to do it and follow Manny because now he's doing all sorts of college football, not just a Hurricane. So it's going to get even better for you if you're a fan of Manny's work. And two, it's not going to be very long before I'm kicked out of here, and it's going to be somebody else with a little bit more higher profile. So enjoy me while you have it, people. All right.
No, not at all. Not at all. You're
so,
not going anywhere, brother. You and I are a
so,
tag team.
so what was the question?
Your immediate thoughts on the Clemson win,
Yeah,
because to me it
yeah.
was a turning point for the program.
I think it is obviously the most significant win in Mario Cristobal's tenure thus far here in Miami. And I think it is, more so than the Florida State game. I think this was the most important game of the season because if you didn't win this one, you would have been 0-3 in conference. You would have been limping into that Virginia game. Virginia coming off a win against North Carolina. Who knows how that game would have gone with the Hurricanes just basically shattered in terms of their confidence and their chances of having any sort of momentum or opportunity to play for an ACC title or make a decent bowl game. And then you're going to have to line up against Florida State and Tallahassee, and the whole season could have been just a train wreck and a disaster. And who knows, you could have even ended up sub 500 in the ACC this year had they not pulled this win off. I think it's also important because of the way they won and the circumstances surrounding the win. I think coming into the game, not having Tyler Van Dyke, everyone across the country assumed the Hurricanes were going to get blown out. Coming into this game after 2 straight losses, getting that news about Tyler Van Dyke, not being sure about what's going to happen in the game, people assumed the Hurricanes were just going to get smashed and Clemson was just going to physically destroy them, or a lot of people did. And the physicality with which the Hurricanes played, the heart with which they played, the fact that they got down 10 points again going into the fourth quarter and battled back to take that game into overtime and win it in overtime in that fashion with a freshman quarterback, to me was outstanding. And I think, like you said, winning it the Mario way, we've talked about it for a few years now as to why the running game is important, regardless of whether you're going to be a spread team or not. You saw what happened to Tennessee last year. You've seen what's happened to them even this year. If somebody can cover the receivers or bring enough pressure to the quarterback, they're not going to be able to use that spread and shred type offense, and they have no running game that needs to be respected. When that happens, you're a one-dimensional football team, and you're subject to not only the defenses that play you, but the weather conditions, injuries, things that are out of your control. Whereas when you have your running game as a foundation and you can lean on that, no matter what happens, what kind of weather you play in, what kind of injury circumstances you're facing, whatever the situation, you can lean on your physicality and your ability to get 3 to 4 yards every carry and physically beat down the opponent and win it that way. And that's what you saw with Mario Cristobal's team this past Saturday. And I was incredibly impressed with it.
Yeah, we're going to talk some about clock management in a little bit because obviously, had they lost this game, I think we would be talking about that would have been the lead subject yet again, right? Because they had the ball with about a minute to go, they had a timeout left, and decided ultimately to play for overtime. And we'll get into why Mario said he did that. But I think to me, I want to share some key stats that I took away from this to sort of show you why Miami won the Mario Cristobal way and what that means exactly. And it's pretty evident. It's dominating the line of scrimmage. And they didn't do it for 3 quarters, the first 3 quarters, because Clemson was up 17-7. And Miami was sort of playing a very apprehensive offensive game plan. Don't turn the ball over. The defense made some big plays, created turnovers, so forth. But it wasn't until the fourth quarter, really, when they started that 15-play, 75-yard drive with 12 runs, that Mario said, okay, we're going to put our foot down. We're going to make a statement. We're going to run the ball right down Clemson's throat. And say what you want about the Tigers being 4-3. I think their offense has a lot more to do with why they're 4-3 than their defense. Their defense is still very, very good. Emory Williams, okay, kept clean on 84.8% of his dropbacks against Clemson. That's a good percentage. Obviously, result of Miami staff making sure he also got rid of the ball quickly, but still, Clemson blitzed him 17 times on his 33 dropbacks. Miami's offensive line did its job. Zero sacks. All right. Cade Klubnik, meanwhile, was under pressure on 20 of his 41 dropbacks. Miami blitzed him 19 times when he was under pressure. Klubnik was 4 of 15 for 77 yards passing. Ruben Bain obviously was huge in this game. He had 10 quarterback pressures, 2 sacks, a forced fumble. I thought the play that really proved that Miami had turned the corner physically is when he literally blew the right tackle off the line of scrimmage and just got to Klubnik literally with one hand and just swiped him down. His 29 pressures for the season are 29th among Power 5 defensive linemen. They're 29 pressures, actually 13th among all Power 5 defensive linemen. Leonard Taylor deserves a tip of the cap.
Yep.
Played a season high 56 snaps versus Clemson, all basically at nose tackle, as Miami went with a 3-3 stacked defense.
Yeah.
Lance Guidry, I thought, did a great job. He talked about that in his press conference yesterday, how really he wanted to throw a curveball at Clemson. And part of it was because of injuries. Nigel Lee Kelly, as we know now, is out for the season. They have some other defensive linemen nicked up, including Akeem Mesidor, who still isn't back. But kudos to Miami on winning the game at the line of scrimmage, Carlos. And I think ultimately, I've talked a lot about this. I was on the Big O show. I've talked to other people about this going forward. This travels. And what I mean by that is it's a tried and true concept. You dominate the line of scrimmage. You can be Alabama. You can be Michigan. You can be Georgia. You can be that kind of a program who doesn't necessarily have to have great quarterback play, who maybe don't have a bunch of playmakers at wide receiver, but you win the game the old-fashioned way, the old school way. And it may not win every single week, right? You may not be able to dominate everybody, but it has lasting effect. Michigan is Michigan now, not only because they've got a coach who they hired to go and steal signs for 3 seasons now. They have one of the best offensive lines and defensive lines in college football. Georgia, they've won 2 national titles in a row. Why? They dominated the line of scrimmage. Alabama is Alabama because of who they are at the line of scrimmage. It's why Mario was brought in. And I think for me, this win is a signature moment in his tenure here.
Yeah, not only because of what it means for the remainder of the season, but because what it means for the type of culture and team and foundation he wants to establish. From the get-go, he wanted to be physical, but he just didn't have the horses to do it last year or the buy-in also. So these guys are willing to commit their bodies to it and bring that sort of physicality to it and have the players to do it. As far as the running game goes, it's not only that you're physically beating your opponent up front and that you're able to move the football on the ground. It's also the fact that what ended up happening in that fourth quarter was once Miami became, dead set on beating Clemson at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, but specifically on offense, when they started hammering them with the run, Clemson then had to break out of their zone and start committing more bodies to the box and start playing single coverage on the outside, which then makes it easier on the young quarterback because now it's just one-on-one matchups. Find the best ones. Find Colby Young. Find, Restrepo, find other guys one-on-one and get the ball to them instead of having to read the defense and deal with that Clemson pressure. So that was huge. I mean, I think the offensive MVP this game was the offensive line, like you said. I think they were dominant, especially in that fourth quarter, rushing for over 200 yards as a team. Of course, 80 of that came on Brashard Smith run, but still, they were really important at the most critical moments of the game. The defensive line was explosive, was dominant as well. And I think the 3-3-5 that Lance Guidry threw out there not only was a great changeup, but it played to the strengths of this team and specifically to the way Clemson wanted to play them. Because of the odd front alignment, it confused Clemson's blocking scheme a little bit because they didn't come into the game anticipating that. It allowed Leonard Taylor to work one-on-one on the center as a nose tackle. It allowed Ruben Bain to work not only on a tackle, but also pass rush a guard on occasion that allowed him to get more pressure and situations and matchups that he preferred. And allowed you to bring pressure from different angles with three linebackers, but still being solid against the run. And it also allowed you to be solid against the run, but be able to defend the pass because KJ Cloyd can run with tight ends and receivers. Of course, he gave up a touchdown, but he was there in position to knock the ball down. At least he just had to face Godzilla in the end zone, who happened to be like 6'9". Yeah, 6'9", just going over the top and snatching it from him. But he was in position to make the play. So I hope to see more of this 3-3-5 moving forward. Of course, it depends on what the offensive system is that they're facing. But I think the rest of the way, this would be playing to Miami's strengths in terms of utilizing their best defensive linemen who aren't necessarily tackles, right? Using Leonard Taylor, using Bain, using another big defensive like Thomas Gore, using other guys that are quicker up front and using that ability to maneuver and defeat offensive linemen to get in the backfield and also use three linebackers to allow them to not only defend the run, but defend the pass.
Yeah, and look, the bottom line is, I think you can say this. I mean, Clemson had an extra week to prepare for Miami. They were coming off a bye week. Lance Guidry throws a curveball at them. Miami plays conservative on offense. You can say Miami outcoached Clemson this week, right? I mean, they had the extra week to prepare. They weren't ready to see what they saw from the Hurricanes. I get it. You threw a surprise at them, but at the same time, it was the right approach from Mario Cristobal to play this way. And it's hard to argue. I know people were sitting here criticizing him, and I was one of them at the time through the first three quarters. I'm like, they're playing too conservative. They're playing too conservative. They're playing too conservative. I kept saying it over and over. And that when I filed my story at the gun, I was taking a big shot at Shannon Dawson in the offense because I thought, okay, they're going to lose this game somehow. I had to prepare a story and have it ready to go, and so I could run downstairs and do my interviews. And so I included that in the first story that I filed, Carlos, because I thought they were too passive. And then at the end, listening to Mario's explanation, talking to Emory Williams and seeing what an old golly gee, sweet boy he is, like it's just innocent, right? Like this innocent guy. Like, okay, I get it, Mario. You didn't want to risk it because you didn't want the kid to make mistakes. And you didn't have necessarily the confidence like you do in Tyler Van Dyke. So you had to play conservative. But I still thought, Carlos, with a minute to go, one timeout in pocket, the ball's at the 40-yard line, you haven't given up a sack all day. Emory Williams has thrown some really good passes, hooked up with Colby Young for some big plays, played for the field goal, right? In overtime, can we at least agree that it's fair to criticize Mario for not taking a shot to set up a field goal at the end of regulation?
I'm very critical of all his clock management decisions as far as season. I'm critical of the way they called that game offensively for the first three quarters because to me, the first three quarters they weren't calling the game conservatively. They were calling the game as if Emory Williams was Jake Gyllenhaal and the boy in the plastic bubble. And they just didn't want him to get touched by anything or have anything happen. They weren't playing to reduce the risk of turnovers or mitigate the risk and put themselves in a position where, a chance of a turnover is minimal. They were just playing to avoid all possible negative plays. They were almost like, we know a negative play is going to come. Let's just try and keep this between 3 yards of the line of scrimmage and do nothing else besides that. And if we happen to pop something, we pop something. But let's get into the fourth quarter and hopefully we can kick a field goal. But they decided in the fourth quarter to open it up a little bit with the running game. And the reason they did that, like I said, is because they had to start committing more bodies to the box. As far as that final, minute 40 or whatever it was, yes, I believe Mario should have pushed the ball a little bit. I think I would have run the ball though to try and push it down the field and get into field goal range a little bit, and then try a play action pass here and there with Emory Williams to try and not turn the ball over. Now, the decision that Mario made, I can't be too disappointed in it because to me, it ends up working in their favor because you have a shorter field in overtime. You can now let your running game dominate. You have a shorter field to read for Emory Williams. Your what you're going to face is likely man coverage in the red zone and the goal line, so it's easier for him to read. And with the way that they're pass protecting and run blocking, they felt good about that. They also felt good about stopping Clemson within the red zone because of the way their defense was playing and not having to defend passes over the top so they could commit more guys in the secondary to the box and run support and run fits. So I understand why Mario did it. I would have liked to have seen him try for the field goal, be a little bit more aggressive. But with the freshman quarterback, being in that situation where you feel confident at home, you feel like you can beat them up inside the red zone in overtime and get that W, I understand why he did it.
Well, the result worked, but had it not been the case, I think we'd all be sitting here today saying he let another game go. You got to try to
Yeah.
win that game in regulation. So, to me, I know that I had some critics on Twitter saying, "Hey, it worked. Why are you criticizing him?" Even if you want to play conservative, you could have taken a shot with 10 seconds left, one timeout. You get a throw in the middle of the field, even if it's 30 yards down the field, it gets picked off. You're leaving one play for Clemson to try to score, right? So,
Yeah.
to me, you could have played conservative. At least take one shot down the field. You get a pass interference. Who knows? You give Borregales a shot to hit the game-winning field goal. I wouldn't, if I were Mario, I'd want to see him play that scenario differently the next time. Just because who wants to go to overtime? You never know
I
what
think if
can
he had
happen.
Tyler Van Dyke, there's no doubt he would have been more aggressive in that situation. But I think with Emory Williams, he felt like he didn't know if the kid could get it done, and he didn't want to put that on his shoulders. He didn't want to put all that pressure on him and have this kid press at the wrong moment and turn the ball over. And then guess what? Then the situation flips on his head, and now they lose on a field goal as time expires because the kid threw an interception.
No, I get
So
it.
I understand why, I wanted him to be aggressive, but the issue is I understand why he did it.
Yeah. No, and he mentioned, Don Chaney Jr. getting banged up. He didn't want, this is on his press conference yesterday, Monday, that he didn't want, to sort of leave AJ Allen, who's not as good a pass blocker, obviously, back there trying to
Yeah.
protect Van Dyke. But again, I mean, not Van Dyke, Emory Williams. But again, uh, you to me, it's like one play, dude. Just at least give your team one shot at getting in the field goal range, and they just opted to play to overtime. So it is what it is. They won. Kudos to Mario Cristobal and his staff. Their plan worked. Going forward, 5 games here. Virginia's coming up next. We'll talk about them in a minute, but a couple injury updates and so forth. Tyler Van Dyke is expected to play this week. Mario said as much right after the game. Obviously, he and the coaching staff were hopeful that he would be available to play against Clemson. But look, TVD took a bunch of big shots in that North Carolina game. I know he got hit in the knee running out of bounds on one play early in that game with a helmet. Got hit, I don't want to say speared, but certainly nailed really hard on that touchdown pass to Jacoby George against North Carolina. So his ribs and his back were a little banged up as well. Carlos, let's spin the conversation forward. Emory Williams did his job. He played a clean football game for the most part. He had the one interception, which is really more on Jacoby George than him for breaking off that route. Threw a touchdown pass. Some people were thinking maybe it's quarterback controversy week. Leave Emory Williams in. They won with him. I don't think there's any controversy. I think Miami has to go with Tyler Van Dyke if he's healthy. Where do you stand on this?
I agree. I think if Tyler's healthy, if he can go, he goes. He's clearly the better quarterback at this stage in their careers right now. Not to say that Emory won't be at that level at some point. He's just not there right now. Tyler gives him the best chance to win when he's in there. And I think, obviously Emory didn't give us a whole lot to project forward just because of the way the game plan he was given. Ultimately people have to understand that quarterbacks are like actors, right? They're only as good as the script they're given. If the director and the writer is giving you, this is a role, this is the way I want you to say the lines, this is the way I want you to do it, then this is the way you got to do it. And it's you may have more ability, you may have more talent, like my man Henry Cavill, who was probably the best Superman of all time in terms of physicality. But in terms of what they gave him,
Chris Reeve. He's not better than Chris Reeve. But go ahead.
In terms of physicality and look, he looks more like Superman to me than Christopher Reeve. Listen, I grew up with Christopher Reeve too. I love that man. Rest in peace. But in terms of a look straight out of the comics, Henry Cavill was Superman, but he just wasn't given too much to do in terms of the script. Acting wise, Christopher Reeve was given a lot to do. So he's the Superman we all remember because he got to play both Clark and Superman, in different ways. Anyway, my point is, if you're not given enough to do, then you're really not able to shine the way you want to shine. And until Emory's given a full script and a full game plan to go in there and really attack a defense instead of being held back and, but like I said, played like the boy in the plastic bubble, we're never going to find out. And I think eventually you'll get to that. But up to now, we know what Tyler Van Dyke can do. And I think because of the way they ended up playing that game, the game plan they went in with, Miami discovered something they could translate over to Tyler Van Dyke. I think they became a little, quick to abandon the run game the last two games against North Carolina and Georgia Tech when they got behind. And this game, they had no choice but to stick with it when they were down 10 in the fourth quarter. They actually leaned on it in the fourth quarter. And that's what got them back in the game and started wearing Clemson down. And I think being able to rely on the running game a little bit more, being a little bit more persistent and patient with it, and also seeing what other guys can do, forgetting the fact that Colby Young can make plays down the field. And you had a guy like Tyler Harrell that you can hand the ball off to in reverse, and other things that you could do with other playmakers like Rashard Smith. Adding that along with the ability of TVD to throw the ball down the field and stress a defense is going to help Miami in the long term in terms of their offense.
Yeah, I think Brashard Smith was certainly a revelation, right? Maybe not to you and to us who know that he's super fast and probably should have been utilized earlier in the season.
I mean, what a concept. Get your fastest guys the ball. Wow.
But he played great, and he had, I know he fumbled at the goal line. Thankfully, Jacoby George was there to scoop it up, but he was used in ways that to me, I say to myself, yeah, that should be Ray Joseph pretty soon, right? Like that, he should be doing the same exact things with Ray Joseph soon. So Miami's got some depth sort of in that speedster playmaker type role, but it was great to see Brashard have the game that he did. The 80-yard run was spectacular. He also made a lot of other plays. I think he had 4 carries, a lot of short, quick swing passes to try to get him the ball in space, and he was productive. So good game for him. I will say this, though. The running back room is banged up. I mentioned Don Chaney Jr. kind of hobbling off the field. 17 carries, second leading rusher with 63 yards. AJ Allen, 16 carries for 54 yards. I liked AJ Allen and the way he ran the ball in this game.
Physical, yeah.
Obviously, you can't rely on him to pass block, but you bring him in obvious running situations. I like his cutback skills, and you will be getting Henry Parrish back this week. Mario Cristobal said Parrish, of course, didn't play against Clemson. That was another one of those injuries Mario kept under the radar. He said, "Oh yeah, he's close to coming back." I had heard earlier in the week he was dealing with some issue. I don't want to say what it was, but and ultimately they kept him out. So hopefully you got at least your 2 main guys. I know Mark Fletcher's working his way back. Javonte Citizen, I think, is going to get involved in some tackling this week, some hitting in practice, which he hasn't really done to this point. They've been sort of treating him with kid gloves. I think Travante will probably be back for the 4 November games at that point. And then the same thing with Fletcher. I think Fletcher, they're sort of babying along until he gets fully healthy enough to come back and play. But right now there's just enough depth at that running back position, but they need guys to get healthy. I don't know what Chaney's status is. I know Mario said he's going to be okay. I'm sorry, I don't trust Mario anymore when he talks about injuries. You kind of just have to understand he's trying to win games and play strategy when he talks about it. So we will see what happens this week, but I do think they will have at least 2 healthy running backs in Parrish and AJ Allen. We'll find out what happens with Chaney. As far as receiver position, Colby Young, I thought he had his best game as a Hurricane. And I know he's had some really bright moments, including the Virginia Tech game last year, but 6 catches, 76 yards, and a touchdown. The touchdown grab, leaping grab. Had another leaping grab for a big gain. But the play that impressed me the most, and I thought saved Miami's season, was that 3rd and 13 where Emory Williams hit him coming out of the break perfectly in stride. There were like 6 defensive players around them for Clemson when he caught the ball. And I think that play, when we think back to this season and we say, where did things get better for Miami? It was that play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's always been strong with the ball when he catches it. He's hard to bring down. He's the type of guy that sometimes will drop it here and there when he loses focus. But when he's locked in, man, his catch radius is amazing. Got strong hands, physical dude, fast as well, and get down the field. He's a weapon that I think has been underutilized this season. It's been disappointing for me, and I'm glad they sort of rediscovered him in this game. It seems like whenever a Miami quarterback is struggling with the last 2 seasons, they turn around and say, all right, just toss it up to Colby Young and see what he can do. And every time he makes plays. So I think moving forward, they need to incorporate more Colby Young in this offense and try and take some of that pressure away from Restrepo. The thing is, Restrepo is a great receiver and he's great at what he does. The issue with it is when you throw the ball to him so many times, you're lacking explosiveness in the passing game. He's not an explosive guy. He can get behind the defense on double moves and rubs in here and there, but he's not going to be the kind of guy that straight lines you down the field or takes a slant and takes it 80 yards to the house necessarily. But you have other guys that can make those sorts of plays, and you need to be able to use these guys and utilize them for what their strengths are. And Colby Young is those 50-50 balls or throwing it to him underneath and let him be physical and break tackles after the catch. putting Jacoby George in motion, letting him beat the defense down the field because he could take the top off of the defense. Using Brashard Smith in multiple ways to get him the ball, and then allowing Restrepo to work the middle of the field and do his thing and be that reliable guy when you need a third down. To me, the comparison that I think of Restrepo is not necessarily Braxton Berrios. I'm going to go to the NFL. To me, he's OJ McDuffie. That's the kind of guy to me that Restrepo is. He's a tough receiver, always open. You throw it in his area, he's going to catch the ball. But OJ wasn't a burner, although he'd like to tell you he was. He wasn't a burner. He did return punts at one point, but his thing was getting open when they needed him to, converting third downs, moving the chains, and being the most reliable receiver on the field. And I think that's Restrepo's role. So I think being able to target these guys in a way that fits them best, that suits their strengths, is going to be key moving forward. And I think it's taken Dawson maybe this long in the season to sort of figure out what that is for each player.
Should we bring up your OJ McDuffie story? The one that your wife loves. Should we bring that one up?
No, I don't know, man. I don't know. Listen, let's just say it ended up with me and OJ McDuffie and Kajana Carter at the quarter deck drinking a lot of vodka tonics, and it did not end well for me.
Oh man, that's where Miami fans would have been had they lost this game, because it was there for the taking. And but they won again. Great win for Mario. All right, I want to transition here a little bit to talk about Virginia briefly, because I don't have a huge scouting report on them, Carlos, but I wanted to share some numbers from their win against North Carolina. Number one, they ran for 228 yards and 3 touchdowns. They averaged over 4 yards a carry. Tony Muskett, their quarterback, their transfer from Monmouth, was 20 of 30 for 208 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. They got a transfer, a kid from Northwestern, Malik Washington, who's been sensational all season long. 12 catches, 115 yards, and a score. He's one of the leading receivers in the ACC, highly productive. Paris Jones is their lead running back. They got Mike Hollins, another running back. They kind of had split duty there. 14 carries, 67 yards for Jones, 15 carries for 66 yards, and 3 scores for Hollins. So it's kind of a two-headed backfield. Defensively, they did a good job on Drake May. He was 24 of 48 for 347 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Obviously, you go into North Carolina, you hold them to 149 yards rushing after they ran for over 200 against Miami. They did a good job. It did certainly good enough to win that game. So I want to say don't sleep on Virginia, but I think by now Miami's lost enough games to Virginia since joining the ACC where they should, right?
No, absolutely not. And is there a better name for a quarterback of a university, of a college football team right now than Tony Muskett at Virginia? His name is Muskett, and he quarterbacks the Virginia Cavaliers. This guy ride in with a musket on the horse as he's coming onto the field, because that is freaking fantastic, bro. The only thing better would have been in is if his name was freaking Ichabod Crane. That was it. That would be it. If the headless horseman is like chasing, that is the only thing that would have been better.
But my God,
Tony Muskett coming in with the shooter on his arm as he walks onto the field, that is fantastic. But yeah, I think it just like against Clemson, I think the Hurricanes foundationally need to stop the run, and they're great at it. They held Clemson to 21 yards this past week on the ground, and they had 2 really good running backs, really good offensive line. They need to do the same to Virginia and force Muskett and turn him into a pea shooter and force him into turnovers and bad decisions. I think going into this game, they need to go back to that 3-3, that 3-3-5. That was effective for them and allowed them to find something on defense that they hadn't had all season. I think Georgia Tech and North Carolina pounded them with a run in the second half of both those games, and they lost a little steam. I think because they went with the 3-3, it allowed them to rotate the defensive line a little bit more, keep them a little fresher with a shorter rotation, and also use their best players at linebacker to really shut the run down and still, like I said, protect the pass with KJ Floyd out there making plays. And Wesley Bassett, too, is a pretty good defender in terms of the pass. So I think this game should be, again, stop the run, use that 3-3, and then use the things you discovered on offense. Virginia stopped North Carolina's running game. They gave up 149 yards. And that's, if you call that stopping them, but it was below Carolina's average. But I think Carolina relying so heavily on Drake May is the pitfall that Miami needs to avoid. You don't want to attempt 48 passes in this game. You want to be in a position where you are dominating the line of scrimmage and you're balanced and you are using your run now to set up the pass and force Virginia to cover your receivers one-on-one, which I don't think they can do.
Well, I think Virginia played coverage mostly on May. They only blitzed him 17 times on his 52 dropbacks. So
because they couldn't run the football.
Right, and they played under pressure. He was only under pressure 23% of his dropbacks. He was 3 of 9 under pressure. Drake May was in that game, but ultimately it felt like Virginia was dropping guys back in coverage and taking advantage of maybe some third and longs, and he just wasn't able to make those completions. So it'll be interesting to see what the Miami staff comes up with this week. But I think at least the fact that Virginia knocked off North Carolina and pulled off the upset, nobody in Miami's locker room has to be overlooking them. So that's a good sign going into this game, even though they're
Not
two
only
and
that,
five.
but hey, just like years past, baby, we're back to the same discussion. Before it was like, hey, we still got a shot at the Coastal. Now we still got a shot at the ACC title game. You know,
Well,
it's
there's
like Dumb and
yes,
Dumber. You're saying there's a chance. Don't you poop on it, Manny. Don't you ruin this for me. I was sitting there. I'm like that meme of the guy from The Hangover where
yeah,
he's got all the numbers and the calculations when he's counting cards. That's what I've been doing this week, trying to figure out
yes.
how the Canes get into the ACC championship game. And please do not ruin all the math work I've done this week.
I will not. I will not. I don't know if you want to share any of your math, but I know it's got to be complicated because they still are a game back and they do have to win at FSU on the road and run the table here, I think, to really make a strong case for it. But you're right. They're not out of it. That was a season saving win over Clemson. So we will see going forward. Now, look, there's some recruiting news. I want to touch on this a little bit. It was one of the mailbag questions we got, Carlos. Miami picked up a commitment from 4-star edge rusher Booker Pickett, Miami legacy recruit out of Tampa Wharton last week. Of course, he commits right before they lose Armando Blunt, the 5-star defensive lineman who was in the 2025 class. He ends up going to rival Florida State, reclassifies into the 2024 class. That's the thing that has Miami fans angry because Ruben Bain, his former teammate, or at least at the same school, they weren't teammates actually because Blunt came over from Dillard last year, but went to the same high school as Ruben Bain. He ends up defecting to Florida State after seeing Ruben Bain have such a tremendous day. Miami's recruiting class now ranks 10th in the 247 Sports Composite with 24 commitments. They're 19th in average player ranking. Florida State's class ranks 4th overall with 22 commitments. They're 7th in average player ranking. Seminoles have 3 5-stars, 12 4-stars. Miami has 10 4-stars in their class. I know you don't necessarily care about the star ranking, Carlos, but it is something that rankles the balls of Miami fans. So,
There we go. More ball rankling this week.
so this question comes from Brent Peterson, BP9121. Why did Blunt flip? What's the backstory there? Is it just about a bigger bag? Also, we have struck out on every major defensive lineman this cycle. Is this just a failure on Joe Salavea for not connecting with these Southern players? All right. First of all, Brent, I would not necessarily blame this on Salavea or Jason Taylor. First of all, Miami's got some good defensive linemen. They've got a
Yeah.
few 4-stars that they have committed this class, including Artavius Jones, who's out of Bluntstown, which is close to the Tallahassee area, Tallahassee, Gainesville type area up there in the North Florida. So they've got him. They've got 3 really good edge rushers, 4-star edge rushers that they've got from different parts of the country. I just think this is a case of Florida State being really, really good right now and being in the national championship hunt and doing a good job recruiting. Look, everybody's going to accuse me after I say this of being a Florida State fan. Mike Norvell has done
They're
a
right.
ridiculously good job, Carlos. Like, you cannot knock this guy. Everybody was making fun of him when he came from Memphis, right? Oh, look at who they're hiring. Florida State's going to be a disaster. I thought Florida State was going to be a disaster. And I'm still not 100% sold that they've completely turned a corner and are going to be great for years to come. But I will say this year, he's capitalized on every opportunity. They've won. They beat LSU. They beat Florida State. I mean, they beat Clemson rather. And now they're in position to make the college football playoff and win the ACC. Like, right now, Armando Blunt went to a program that is technically better than Miami. And you can't necessarily argue with him as a recruit, as being a 5-star guy, knowing Florida State is losing 2 starters on their offensive line of graduation because they're out of eligibility after this year. And they're going to be losing another guy, obviously, early to the draft in Jared Verse. So, look, it happens. If you're a Miami fan, I understand the disappointment, but I don't think there's any need to point fingers here. Florida State has it going. And frankly, they have the number 4 class in the country. Like, what more proof do you need to do that, that you need that he's doing a good job?
Yeah, not only that, but I mean, this is not the last recruit that's going to flip one way or the other. We could have Florida State recruits flipping over to Miami,
Yep.
Florida recruits flipping over to Miami. There's still a long way to go before signing day, right? So this is nothing. This is nothing new as it comes to the recruiting wars here in the state of Florida, and I think fans flipping out over it. It's just everybody has short-term memory. It's like this entire fan base, for the most part, when it comes to recruiting, is like what's her name, Drew Barrymore in 50 First Dates, where just does not remember anything. The next day is completely blank and has to start all
Yes.
over again. And they forget everything that's happened in the past. We've lost plenty of guys, gained plenty of guys. At the end of the day, whatever happens, there's your first shot. Whatever happens, there's going to be changes. And I think as the season progresses, and depending on how the season works out, maybe this guy gets back into the fold if Miami beats Florida State, if Miami runs the table, if Miami gets to the point right before signing day where they are looking like they have forward momentum and are looking like they're turning the corner. Who knows? And who knows what other guys might be brought in as a result of those changes. It all ends up with, can you win on the field? Mario's a hell of a recruiter. He does a great job. He's done a great job coming off a 5-7 season. Did a great job coming in, with short timelines to get guys in the last recruiting class. But there's only so much his salesmanship is going to get you unless there's production on the field. And at some point, they have to start doing that on a consistent basis. And if they're able to do that, if they're able to run the table, they're able to beat Florida State this year, that should pay big dividends in recruiting. And not only that, it's not all 5 stars end up working out, right? We've seen that. And a lot of times 4 stars end up being better than many of the 5 stars are rated higher than them. Ruben Bain, case in point, was not a 5 star. Look what he's doing this season. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's all chill out. Don't get your panties in a bunch. Don't let Manny keep rankling your balls because, first of all, that is disturbing. And second of all, it's uncomfortable. Don't let that happen. Let things play out. Let's see what happens, man. Chill.
And listen, Mario, I know people are like, hey, we need to stack top 10 classes. Like you said, it's not over. There's some other guys that they're after. The guys are trying to flip, etc. So we will see what happens down the road.
And player development also is huge when it comes to recruiting because if guys see they're being developed, that helps you land guys. Because a guy doesn't want to just go and get as many snaps as possible. They want to get ready for the league. And if you're developing players, if you're making them better, and you're making more attractive draft prospects, that goes a long way as well.
All right, this is from Nick Strong, KY Kane 23. Any updates on the D tackle from Bama that we got? It's Jamil Burrows. Yeah, the only update is that he's not playing this season. He's basically being having to sit out this season per transfer rules, and he'll be available to help next year. He'll be available to provide depth next year. So
We
I
should have
know.
gotten Mac Brown on that case. If Mac Brown would have helped the Hurricanes out, he would have been playing right now.
Well, Jamil Burrows, his departure from Alabama is a little clouded in controversy because of some issues that happened there. So I don't think he would necessarily be given the green light or some sort of help from the NCAA. But at this point, that's the situation with Burrows. All right, this is from Otto Liller Otto on Twitter. The D line has been nicked up most of the year, and now Nigel Lee Kelly is out for the year. Mesidor seems weeks away, yet over the same time, the D line has generally played excellent. Are we one more injury away from the D line falling apart? Or can we hold it together with the 2s and 3s and crafty schemes and structural adjustments? Thanks.
Well, I think you saw with the 3-3-5, they were able to hold it together with the structural adjustments and use more linebackers to and put these defensive linemen in better positions in terms of their techniques, in terms of where they're lined up in the gaps, and assist and use since they're using less defensive linemen, they're able to rotate in on a shorter leash. So I think the 3-3-5 going forward is going to be the adjustment to help in terms of schemes. I don't know that you could sustain another injury or two in that defensive line because then that would be dangerous. At that point, I don't know what you're going to end up doing. But
Yeah.
I think Mesidor is coming back at some point. I think you're going to get a little healthier as time goes on, and I think this 3-3-5 is going to help a whole lot.
Well, I'm going to read the snap counts from this game just so that you can figure out here that basically Miami went about 14 deep total. In terms of double-digit snaps, everybody else was very, very limited in usage. As far as the defensive line, Ruben Bain 62 snaps, Leonard Taylor 56 snaps, Jared Harrison Hunt 47. And then you look at the rest of the defensive linemen who popped in. Branson Dean, who was originally a starter at the beginning of the year, only played 19 snaps. Chance Williams played 8. Jacob Lichtenstein 6. Ahmad Moten 5. Thomas Gore 4. Josh Horton, the true freshman, 3. So I agree. I don't think they can afford any more injuries. I think ultimately, as long as the 3 main guys or 4 main guys, including Branson Dean, when they decide to go to the 4-2, I think as long as those guys are healthy, you're fine. I think the moment you lose one of them, yes, it could become an issue. Let's move on to the next question here. This is from NMD Grant. Miami sits at 5-2 right now. How do Miami and Mario have to finish this season for it to be considered a successful one?
Listen, I think 9-3 is a huge success. I think 8-4 would also be a success compared to last year. But I think ultimately it's not just the record; it's how they obtain the record. I think if they lose to Virginia and they end up 4-4 in the conference and they end up 8-4 in the season, that would be disappointing. Um, I think if they end up 9-3 with beating Florida State or even losing to Florida State, if they are able to if they lose to Florida State, that's fine. They lose to Virginia and beat Florida State, I'm okay with it, but it's still a little disappointing losing to another subpar ACC opponent. But ultimately, to me, I think 8-4 is a success. Coming off of last season at 5-7, we said at the beginning of the year, I would like to see them hold serve against opponents here in the ACC that they shouldn't lose to. I'd like to see them beat either Florida State or Louisville, or I'd ideally like to see them beat both. But I need to see them beat at least one of those teams to feel comfortable that, hey, listen, we're really trending upward here in the ACC.
I would say this, studying the ACC every single week for the Athletic. I would say Virginia and Boston College are two teams that are improving. I would say NC State has just sort of not been NC State all year long. Louisville's coming off an ugly loss to Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago that kind of ruined their win over North Carolina. Florida State is Florida State. So if I had to say, I think Miami should at least go 3-2 the rest of the way and finish 8-4. I think anything less than that is a disappointment, but I would prefer Miami go 9-3. I think they should
Yep.
be able to hold serve against Louisville at home, which is probably their second toughest game on paper after Florida State.
Yep.
But you're right, losing to Virginia, losing at Boston College, who is improved, by the way. I like their
Yeah.
quarterback Thomas Castellanos. I
Yeah. He's
pointed that out.
dangerous. He's
Yeah,
dangerous. And, Miami's got that allergy against mobile quarterbacks.
yeah, and it's a late November game in Boston, which will, in the cold and all that kind of crap. So I think 8-4 has to be the minimum. This is for Carlos from Ginger Man Can and Did to a Believer. It looked like Emery's throwing motion changed from the spring game. Do you think, knowing a freshman, the tools are there for Miami to have a QB after Tyler? Will he likely battle a transfer quarterback or Ja'Cory Brown?
Okay, so in terms of the mechanics, I didn't really focus in on it on the spring, but I know he's got a bit of a longer delivery than I'd like. But I think most of that has to do with the fact that he wasn't trusting his reads initially. He wasn't certain about what he was doing. I think when you saw him being a little bit more comfortable in the fourth quarter, his release quickened up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What's strange to me is I think he likes to throw the ball without the laces. He actually, I think, for the most part, throws the ball on the bald side of the ball. Not bald like us, but I mean the bald side, the one with no laces, which I
Right.
saw him doing in warmups and I saw him consistently doing out throughout the game, which is super weird to me because as a quarterback, I always felt uncomfortable just throwing it with no laces. I guess because you get so used to doing it growing up. But I guess as a guy that has played in a shotgun snap, I guess his whole life, throwing it with the back of the ball to him is very comfortable, more natural than throwing it with laces. That to me is more concerning than anything else. But that's not a big deal. In terms of fighting for the starting position, I think he has the tools and the ability to do it. I think arm strength wise, we didn't get to see a whole lot of it, but his accuracy we saw is pretty good when he's throwing the ball down the field to Colby Young uh, on that fade. That was a beautiful throw, not just a great catch. I think he has ability to push the ball down the field. He just needs time. He needs seasoning. And I think eventually, if I'm a betting man, I think Ja'Cory Brown stays for the spring because it's ultimately he can compete and see if he wins out. If he doesn't win the job, then he can go ahead and transfer anyway. So I think Ja'Cory will probably stick around through the spring, compete with Emory Williams. They might bring in a transfer quarterback, who knows, just to try and add some additional depth just in case Ja'Cory leaves. But if Ja'Cory doesn't win the starting quarterback job in the spring, or at least looks like he's on path to do that, then I think he'll transfer at the end of that spring.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen going forward. I don't think any of the young quarterbacks that Miami has committed at the moment are the kind of guys that, tickle your tail feather, right? Because none of them are 5-star, elite 4-star type guys in terms of recruits. So I do think the transfer portal will be utilized if Tyler Van Dyke decides to go pro after this season. He still has 1 year of eligibility left. We will see what happens there. But I would suspect if you were to tell me right now, Manny, who's the starting quarterback to start the 2024 season, I think it's Emory Williams. And I think Ja'Cory
Yeah.
Brown is elsewhere. And I think there's a transfer quarterback who comes in and competes, but I think Emory Williams is capable of quarterbacking this team next year.
Unless they land a stud in the transfer portal from another school, and they're like, okay, here we go.
Right, right. All right. This is from Andrew V17 on Twitter. We all know about Mario's inability to be a good game day coach, but should we be worried moving forward? Do you think he needs a better strategy or advisors helping him with that?
Yes. I think we should be worried, but I think at the same time, thankfully, the way he wants to build this roster, at some point, this front line on both sides of the ball is going to be so dominant that maybe they can overcome his mistakes. And I think they did that this past Saturday. What you don't want is for them to be in a position where every week he's making a clock management mistake that could possibly cost you the game. And there are guys that have an analyst, offensive analysts, who are just in charge of the clock, in charge of 2-point conversion situations. I think they should have one of those guys just with a chart. Hey, guess much time left? What are we doing? When do we use timeouts? How do we do this? And I think it's also a lack of maybe expanding or doing detailed 2-minute drills and 4-minute offense in practice. I think they need to do some of that situational football, because it's not just running plays in practice and seeing what the defense gives you and then running against that and running a quick 2-minute drill. You need to put yourselves in positions like they just had this past weekend. Okay, minute 30 left on the clock, one timeout, ball on the 40. What do we do here? And it's not just for the players, it's for the coaches as well.
Yeah. I think this is who Mario Cristobal is. I think when you're in a tight game, you're gonna have a coach that clenches a little bit, right, and pulls back the offense. We saw it against Texas A&M last year. They wanted to be conservative on the road in that game. I think unless he has full confidence in his quarterback, this is the way he's going to coach. And it's just who you have to accept him to be. Ultimately, if he has a team that dominates at the line of scrimmage, same way Alabama and Georgia and these other programs do, as I mentioned previously, then I don't think you're going to have to worry about it, because Miami's going to be one of the best teams in the country every single year. They're going to win a lot of games 35-7 or 35-3. And that's ultimately what you want as a Miami Hurricanes fan. You want to get back to the days when maybe you don't have to put up 50 points, but you win games in convincing fashion and you wear the opponent down. And I think that's what he's trying to build here. I don't ever think they're going to be a team that you are not nervous about in the fourth quarter. It's just the way it is. All right, this is from J Bar. It's _J Bar on Twitter. Best hotel to book in Charlotte in December. I like the confidence, J Bar. Carlos, have you ever been to Charlotte before?
I have, but I did not stay in a hotel. I went to see my wife's cousin. She was in South Carolina. She was living there at the time, and then we drove into Charlotte and hung out there for the day. Great city, love it, but just did not stay at a hotel.
The Westin Charlotte is the best hotel in Charlotte. I've stayed there several times. That's where the media press conference stuff goes down, and so that's the best hotel for me. But I did rent a house last time in the city, not too far away. I did that with a couple of other friends when I was there for the coaching convention in January, and we had a good time. So Airbnb it isn't a bad choice either. All right, this is from Yost J83 on Twitter. Will TVD really start Saturday, or there'll be another late week thing that pops up? Here's what I'll say to you, Yost. I'm fairly confident. Okay, I would say 80 to 90% confident he's going to play this week. I think the doubt is fair to have. I think when you're dealing with some of the bumps and bruises and swelling and so forth, that's the kind of stuff that can flare up and get worse if it isn't taken care of the right way, or if the body doesn't react well to some of the stuff that you're taking to get kind of recover from that stuff. Ultimately, I've been assured by a couple different people, not just Mario and his staff, but different people, that he should be back this week for Miami. That's why I'm more confident than I was a week ago. All right, Carlos, this is from Brandon Canes, BC Mantilla. Should the Canes give consideration to trying out the tush push down the stretch with Jakari Brown? I know our offense usually doesn't run plays from under center, but it could be worth a look given we have a strong athletic QB available for 4 games and a strong offensive line like Philadelphia.
I mean, I think they should include packages for Jakari Brown moving forward anyway. I think I thought they would have done it this game. It's one of the things that I felt like would help, not only just with Emory Brown in there, but I thought it would have Emory Williams, geez, but also with Tyler Van Dyke. I think adding an additional dimension to the run game will help you down the stretch. And Jakari Brown being a guy that will force the defense to play 11 on 11 will help the offense overall, not just with the tush push, but doing more stuff like quarterback power, zone reads, and being a threat to run the football, to me would be a huge help.
Yeah, I think at some point Miami has to break out a Ja'Carri Brown package. I agree with you, and maybe the tush push isn't it because I don't like you said these guys don't play under center a whole lot,
Eh,
if at all. So I just want to see something for
yeah, and it doesn't, it's not the size of the package. It's really how they use it.
him. All right, what does Dawson and TVD need to do to be more diversified with passing targets? Seeing Emery spread the ball around more equally is what I'd like to see TVD do. This is from Kane6, E. Julson 6 on Twitter.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about that earlier. I think they discovered a little bit of that in this game because they had to, because there was no dependence on Xavier Restrepo because TVD wasn't back there. And I think also Clemson tried to zero in on him a little bit and take him out of the game. But because Emory Williams came in there with fresh eyes, he was able to find other guys, especially Colby Young, and connect with him. And I think they need to do that moving forward. And like I said, get the ball to the guys who make the plays in the spots and in the ways that make them most effective.
This is from Ronnie J or J_Ronnie. Is it just trolls or is there real smoke that Chance Robinson is leaning toward flipping to Ohio State? Chance Robinson is a 4-star receiver commitment for Miami from St. Thomas Aquinas. First of all, Chance plays for the South Florida Express. The South Florida Express obviously has very strong connections to Ohio State. They've got Brandon Innes there. They've had other receivers signed with Ohio State as well. Carnell Tate is another one. So is there smoke? Yes, there's smoke. Is it going to happen? I'm not 100% sure. Knowing Chance Robinson's father, talking to him throughout the 7-on-7 circuit, knowing how much he wants his son to play at Miami, I tend to think that he's going to stick with the Hurricanes, but you never know because Ohio State has a great receivers coach who has a pretty good reputation in Brian Hartline, and you never know what can happen in this game.
Yeah, and as you can tell by the Trolls movie, those guys really aren't into college football. They're more into singing, pop medley music and all kinds of stuff, and probably doing psychedelic mushrooms because those trolls are weird. So don't
Yeah,
worry about it.
yeah. This is from Jay Salter, JRS Air 23. Why are so many Miami pundits down on this win against Clemson? We just beat a team that has dominated us for a decade by an average of 40 points per game without our starting QB. A win is a win. I don't get it. Jay, I think you're referring to my buddy Big O, Orlando Alzagari, who I go on the show with quite a bit. Orlando just wants to see Miami be more aggressive in terms of their play calling. He didn't like the game plan through the first 3 quarters, and he thought that playing conservative at the end wasn't smart. I don't know what other Miami pundits have been negative. I think myself, Carlos, obviously, and some other people who have reported on this team have said, "Hey, look, it's an impressive win for Miami." I don't know who else may be referring to, but I think for the most part, all of us understand it's a big win.
Yeah, and I think you could be. Sometimes this is what happens. Listen, guys, I'm just going to speak to you very clearly here, very plainly. All right. Sometimes you hear something negative within a positive comment, and you assume the entire statement is negative. For instance, we were talking about clock management, and Manny was saying that he felt Mario should have been more aggressive. I agree that he should have been more aggressive there at the end of the game, and that could have cost him the game. And that's a negative comment. That's something that really we didn't like about the game. But that doesn't mean we weren't happy with the win, guys. That doesn't mean we weren't impressed by it. Okay? Sometimes bad things happen, but the overall outcome is positive. Not everything's going to be perfect. Not everything everyone says about your team after win is going to be rosy. Not everyone's going to be flying high. That doesn't happen. That's not life anyway. Okay, it's not all black. It's not all white. A lot of it is gray. Okay, that's why gray's my favorite color. That and I don't look good in lighter shades. I'm too heavy a guy for that. But anyway, even though I'm wearing white today. But the idea is yes, this is not only a good win for Miami. It's an important win, and I think we talked about earlier in the year which win or which victory against which team would make the culture, solidify the culture for Mario moving forward and prove that the culture has changed, right? And this is the one. This is the one because of the circumstances that surrounded the game, the way they won the game, and the opponent. So, guys, be happy, dude. Don't worry, be happy. All right? Enjoy it. Forget what everybody else says. Who cares? I'm not the kind of guy that turns on the news or starts reading articles online and after my team wins, start hunting down negative comments and being all pissed off. Like, how dare you not be as happy as I am about my team winning and give me any sort of criticism about what happened? Who cares, man? Who cares what people say? Enjoy it. Why put yourself on a downer after such a high?
All right. This is the last one because we've been at this for a while. Carlos, we need to wrap this podcast up. I appreciate everybody sending in questions, and we'll certainly take more mailbag questions next week. But this is from Coach Travieso Magic Buck on Twitter. He says, "Why does Carlos feel the people don't deserve his live tweets during games?"
Well, it's not that I don't think they deserve them. I just like to focus on the game and not be looking down at my phone. It's bad enough that I text Manny and Kelvin and another one of my friends during the game, and I get pissed off as I'm having to do it because I'm having to do it quickly because I don't want to miss any plays. And really, my thoughts throughout the game really don't matter. What matters is the game. Everybody should be focused on the game, not on Twitter. And that's why I don't live tweet. I want to focus on the game and not on Twitter.
Right, right. And the reality is I do enjoy your text messages, you and Kelvin. You guys certainly provide some comic relief and some comic takes and some serious takes as well, because Kelvin is always very serious, but I sometimes have to laugh at some of the things Kelvin says, some of the things you say. So I appreciate what you guys do during the game to entertain me as it's going down. But I will say you guys are not the only person who texts me. I have other people, other friends who are constantly texting me during the game, and that's why I apologize that I don't respond sometimes, because it is a little nutty during the game. Everybody wants to tell me what they think during the game, which is
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, so I that's why I
Yeah,
enjoy our
I've got
podcast.
buddies. I've got a lot of. I got to get a lot of what the fuck what a lot during the games. Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? What do you think? I'm like, bro, listen, just give me. I'll talk to you at halftime. I can't. I need to focus on this game. I'll give you some thoughts at halftime, but right now, just leave me alone.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, Miami fans, 5-2 after 7 games on a path to I guess pass the preseason prediction of 7.5 wins set in Las Vegas and set by yours truly, who said 7-5. So they're on the right path now. Big win. We will see where they are health wise on Saturday against Virginia. I will be in St. Augustine with my family, visiting my dad, who's unfortunately dealing with a sickness. Spending some time with him and my parents. And then I'll be covering Florida, Georgia on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. on Saturday. I will be back. I will watch the Canes game. We will have another Wide Right podcast next week, reacting to what happens against Virginia, as well as looking ahead to the NC State game. Carlos, anything else? What should I? Oh, I need to tell people to go to your MIA All Day podcast. That's for sure, because you did a nice pregame preview before this Clemson game.
I did. I did not to toot my own horn, but a lot of the stuff we did, like the 3-3-5 and all that other stuff on offense, stack releases, there was some stuff in there that I laid out that I thought the Hurricanes should do. And as I pointed out during our text messages during the game, they were copying my game plan. So you're welcome, Miami.
All right. Make sure you follow Carlos on Twitter at El Ledo
El Ledo 1307
1307 on Twitter.
and at MIA All Day Pod.
Yep.
You need to go to the MIA All Day podcast on Apple, wherever you get your podcasts,
Yeah.
Spotify.
And make sure to subscribe to the Athletic if you've got a couple bucks laying around and you want to throw it my way. You can also, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel where you're watching this video, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Wide Right. I'm Manny Navarro. He's Carlos Ledo. We will see you next week.
Peace.